San Diego's police chief for many years made the most money in the department. But something changed about a decade ago. Cops were leaving the department and those vacancies weren't being filled. So officers started working more overtime.
A lot of overtime, like thousands of hours of overtime.
Paul Parker is the former executive director of San Diego's Civilian Police Oversight Commission. He worked as a police officer and death investigator for decades.
That I don't understand unless they're on some kind of special assignment, but even then, thousands of hours of overtime seems to be excessive.
Take, for example, Officer Jason Costanza. A KPBS investigation found he worked over 3,000 hours of overtime in 2023. The year with the most recently available data. That's equivalent to adding another full-time job plus another part-time job on top of his regular police duties. For Parker, that's a red flag.
I can speak from experience. When you work excessive number of hours, and 19 hours seems to be completely excessive, but when you're working 14, 16-hour days, and then you put a couple of those days back to back, or maybe every other day you're working 14 to 16, you're exhausted. You're absolutely exhausted.
Costanza had to work very long hours to hit that overtime total. We're talking 17-hour shifts, sometimes 19-hour shifts, with short breaks in between. He earned over $400,000 in 2023, the majority of it from overtime pay. That made him the city's highest paid employee. A KPBS analysis of department data found Costanza was among several officers who earned hundreds of thousands of dollars in overtime pay in recent years, and it's mostly the same group, year after year. The department's skyrocketing overtime budget is one concern. There's also the issue of officer well-being and public safety.
You have to consider that these folks are armed and they are tasked with making split-second decisions to save their lives and the lives of the members of the community.
There's research to back up these concerns. Studies and audits show fatigued officers are more likely to face complaints from civilians, and overtime can result in more use of force incidents.
Officers who are particularly tired are they're less likely to de-escalate. They're less able to kind of manage crisis encounters or interact with people who might be impaired in some way.
Lois James is director of the Sleep and Performance Research Center at Washington State University, Spokane. James has worked with police departments around the country. She understands that overtime gives departments flexibility, but relying on it too much can cost cities more money in the long run.
It's what we call the fatigue tax. It's easy for it to get into this vicious spiral.
Working tons of overtime can lead to burnout, which means officers taking sick leave or time off, which means more shifts to fill. There's also the public safety risk of fatigued officers making mistakes on duty. That can result in costly lawsuits or settlements. San Diego Police Chief Scott Wall says he isn't bothered by the huge amounts of money officers are making in overtime.
They put in a tremendous amount of hours. They earn the money that they've made. And they're committed to putting in that time.
And he pushed back on the notion that excess overtime increases the risk of negative interactions between his officers and the public.
I don't think that the right way to answer that is to give you a yes or a no. I think there are so many factors that depend.
Wall says he isn't aware of any complaints against the officers working the most overtime hours.
If they're not out there being respectful, treating people right, making good decisions, then they're going to be pulled back from working overtime.
But the chief says he is open to imposing some limits on overtime.
We do need to have some guardrails in place.
He supports capping shifts at 16 hours with a required 8-hour break. He also supports mandating 1 day off a week. But those changes would need to go through what's called a meet and confer process with the police officers union, which can take months. In the long term, Wall says the department needs to redouble its efforts at hiring and recruiting new officers. Scott Rodd, KPBS News.